always take me back to art at school, infant school especially, because quite often this time of year, as we head on into autumn, we'll be asked by our form tutor or class teacher or art teacher even to bring in something, a sign of autumn that we could paint or draw. Acorns were always popular because they were great things to draw. You've got this shiny, fabulous seed, and then you've got the cup. And if you've got a nice group of 2 or 3 acorns sat in the cups and maybe one acorn out, it always made a good subject for a drawing, I always thought. But now when I look at acorns, and you can see hundreds of thousands of acorns, because at the moment the trees are throwing them at you at the moment. Sit under an oak now and you'll get pelted with these. But I look for something different in my acorns now. I look for a certain type of acorn, and it's an acorn with a hole in it. They don't normally have holes. But if you find an acorn with a hole in it, chances are there may be something living in that acorn. If you look under most oak trees and look at the acorns, you will very quickly come across acorns that have usually a single hole in the holes about 2 millimeters across. This one actually has 2 in it, but most just have a single hole quite near to the base, probably just above the line of where the acorn sits in the cup. Of course, usually once the acorn falls, it falls out of the cup that held it during its development. And the hole is made by, well, at least 2 species, one moth and one beetle. But when I look for these type of acorns with a hole in, I'm not looking for either. I'm looking for an ant. And it's the acorn ant, Temnothorax nylanderi. Now, as far as we know, nylanderi isn't in Nottinghamshire, and it's actually probably about 100 miles short of Nottinghamshire. But previous experience suggests that anything that's in counties like Cambridgeshire or Northamptonshire and Staffordshire are very likely to be in Nottinghamshire. And there are northerly records up the western side of the UK, but are thinly scattered. I think Temnothorax nylanderi could well be residing in Nottinghamshire, but it would take some finding. Good job, I have some at hand. Fortunately, the acorn ant, Temnothorax nylanderi, is quite easily bought and purchased online. There are a number of suppliers, and it is an absolutely delightful little species. 2 days ago, I had a colony of Temnothorax nylanderi, and that colony were kept in the typical test tube setup, and that test tube was housed in the plastic container that you've just seen. But I wanted to photograph them, and I wanted to photograph them on a natural background. So out with the test tube and the ants in it, in with some substrate, in with some acorns and acorn cups and general detritus from underneath an oak tree, back in with the test tube containing the ants, and within an hour they were out of the test tube and moving the eggs and larvae and the single queen into one of the acorns with a hole. And here you can see one worker just coming out of said acorn. It's quite amazing to think that on a woodland floor near you, there could be a small colony of these small red ants. They're only about 3 millimeters in length. They're very, very tiny. And they could be living in a fallen acorn on the woodland floor. But this colony has settled down remarkably quickly. You can see that they're quite slimline and adapted for living in small spaces. Quite often they will live in hollow twigs or any kind of natural cavity, beetle borings in branches and trunks. They will also use them, but they do particularly favour acorns. And these, once they came out of the test tube, quickly set themselves up in this acorn. Eggs and larvae were carried into this acorn, and I was very pleased with how it all went. I did manage to get some kind of photographs. There is considerable scope for better photographs, but all is doing very well. They've settled in and the ants are foraging. I do like this natural setup, and so do the ants. They must really prefer it rather than being in the typical test tube setup that most ant keepers use for new colonies. And this is only a small colony. There's only probably 30-40 workers now. It has grown since I purchased the colony earlier on in the year, and I think they're going to thrive in this setup. There's only one queen to any acorn ant colony. But here we move on to the next day, and I saw less activity from the acorn in the centre of the screen, but I noticed around the acorn on the left that there was some pale brown material, almost like sawdust. And you can see why now, because at some time overnight they moved out of that acorn in the centre and have took up residence in the left hand acorn. And you can see how much material has actually been taken out. They're obviously excavating some galleries. They only use a small space, and nests usually hold anything from about 100 to 200 workers and just the one queen. But you can see in that top left hand corner and at the base of the acorn, as we look at it here, how much light brown material has been brought out by the ants. So although initially going to the acorn in the centre, they've now moved into the left hand acorn. I find it absolutely fascinating. You wouldn't think that ants could live and adapt to something, but if you look at the right hand side of the screen now, you will see some movement within the soil. You will see what's making that soil move in a minute as that ant returns back to the nest. But there you can just see a head appear, and that's what's made the holes in at least one of these acorns. I was quite surprised to get this next bit of footage. You may wonder what it is. Obviously it's a larva, and it's a beetle larva. In particular, it's the larva of a weevil, and a weevil whose larva lives in acorns, developing acorns, and it's Curculio glandium. And I saw this. You'll wonder, as I did, how on earth is this thing going to get out of that hole? It's too fat for it, but thanks to having a very soft body, it eventually emerges after living its life so far, eating the interior of that acorn. And by the looks of it, it looks as though it's eaten far too much acorn. But with a struggle and a lot of pushes and a lot of wriggling, this larva of Curculioglandium eventually manages to extricate it from the confines of its former home. This is the first time I've seen it, and to be honest, it's quite a remarkably lucky bit of footage there. The weevil larva is out and then starts to dig up underneath the acorns and soil surface, looking for somewhere to pupate. They pupate in a cell just under the soil surface. But back to the ants, and you can see here is a worker that is bringing out some material, and it will pick the exact spot that it wants in which to dispose of that material. They are incredibly fussy. They don't just bring soil or substrate out of the nest and just drop it anywhere. It's really well chosen. And they won't just drop it, they will also press it into the surrounding substrate by the front legs. They're remarkable things, Hymenoptera, and that's why I love wasps. I absolutely adore them. And here comes another foraging worker around where the old nest was. They've obviously moved house, and it's amazing how they very quickly realise that their old home has been abandoned and it's not the new home. You wouldn't think that within an acorn on the woodland floor, such life goes on like this. But after something has lived in an acorn, come out of that acorn, something else takes over. That something else is the acorn ant.